So earlier this year, Pokemon Legends ZA was revealed, with the choice of region being Kalos, a surprise to most fans. We made a video about it not long after, but it was definitely very much based on my initial thoughts on seeing it, and I've barely touched on the subject since. Now enough time has passed for me to really think about what I really want to see from the game. Still, I'll try not to drag on with anything regarding the game, as, really, we still only have that initial reveal teaser, and there is still only so much left to say. But before we start, let's plug something. Luna's World. I am currently in the middle of working on a big project involving this character, and I'm using lo-fi beats as a way to get to know her and her friends better. So if you like lo-fi and need something to chill to, check out Luna's World in the description below. With that, let's dive into more Legends ZA. What do you want to talk about? Well, let's talk about X and Y first, since this game uses the same region. Pokemon X and Y are probably the first Pokemon games many fans think of when it comes to the 3DS era. Even though I would argue Sun and Moon had more staying power, they didn't come first. Now, that being said, not all of us think X and Y first because it's our favorite preferred game. I like X and Y, but there is no denying it feels kind of dry as an overall entry compared to both games that came before it, those being the two Black and White Gen 5 games. The games had kind of an unfinished feel to them, specifically in story, because mechanically, these games were really solid, and they were pretty fun to play. I'm talking more about narrative and post-game stuff. There are a lot of theories and some leaks that may or may not even be true, but even if nothing major was actually cut, something still feels off. We did talk about some potential story stuff in our first ZA video, but still, I feel like I need to expand on a few of those thoughts to open this up. For one, it didn't really help when Pokemon like Zygarde felt so irrelevant, especially when you compare it to the third legendary of other trios like Rayquaza. And speaking of those types of Pokemon, Gen 6 reeked of a potential third version, not just due to what I established, but also even through a few data mines for unused moves for Zygarde. This happened with Pokemon Black and White too. We saw moves data mined for a legendary that wouldn't get used until Pokemon Black and White 2 for alternate forms. Not to mention, Zygarde would get new forms, and they would be in Gen 7, not 6. It all felt a little weird. That being said, we've never had any real clear confirmation of Pokemon Z being planned, but what was clear was the potential for a third version. Third versions today probably come off as a dated concept, but it was still nice for Gen 4 and Pokemon Platinum. But today, the concepts used in third versions would just be DLC or something, and rightfully so. Now we go to Legends ZA, very likely a prequel timeline-wise to X and Y, like how Arceus was to the Gen 4 games. And what do we want to see? Zygarde. No, putting it in the game isn't going to magically make it good. But since we're on the subject, it's time to have a game in this series that finally does this thing full justice. The logo definitely vibes like Zygarde a bit, and it also may imply something with the AZ character who could definitely be fleshed out further considering his age. But I'm not sure how Zygarde or AZ will be used. If ZA is in fact during the construction of Lumiose City, and it's similar to real-life Paris, then it can't be thousands of years ago. Maybe 150 or 200 years at most, but it's hard to say for sure. I also wonder how the overworld of the game will work. Scarlet and Violet are open world. Are they going to try to keep that concept for ZA? I'm not sure if it's really needed, and it wouldn't surprise me to see the way the maps are handled to be more like Legends Arceus, with different sections of the city serving as different areas. And will it really just be in the city? I mean, that sounds cool, but I'm not sure how wild Pokemon will entirely fit in that setting. Once again, we've only seen a teaser, so we don't really know what the in-game setting and vibe is truly going to be like. Are we going to be able to, go inside of buildings under construction or something? How does something like Zygarde fit into one of those areas anyway? I suppose it has smaller alternate forms, so maybe it could work and actually no one recognizes it. I imagine we will even get new forms for Zygarde, including some of those being less than 100% forms. There is also the question of how will the battle mechanics change? Legends Arceus had the style mechanic, being able to use agile or strong style. We already are clearly going to have mega evolutions back in this game, probably with some new megas to boot, which we went over in our first ZA video. So I'm not sure how the original move mastery mechanic will work with it balance-wise. I also wonder if they'll change the styles or add new ones. I've seen some fans conceptualize a special style for special attacks only, or a critical style for example, but they would need drawbacks like lowering defense of some kind. The game is unlikely to have competitive battling between players, focused on being a single player game, so it does leave a bit of breathing room to be more experimental. But you also don't want one style to be too strong compared to the others. I think one thing I wouldn't mind seeing them try is customizing those styles, or at least allowing us to focus on styles we may like. Maybe they have individual levels or progression on certain Pokemon based on how much you use them or something like that. It'd make it feel more diverse overall. Legends Arceus was a bit more about catching than battling though, but I wouldn't mind them putting more battles in the main story for ZA this go around. Not to the point where it just feels like another core game, but just a little bit more this time, as it left some of us that enjoy the system desiring a bit more. I imagine that either way, Legends ZA, just based on its setting concept, will have more NPCs around than Legends Arceus, which, story-wise, kind of justified having less people around than the modern Sinnoh era. One last thing about the battle mechanics is trying to figure out how to implement double battles in the game. This isn't high on the things the game needs or whatever, but even as someone that's way more in the single battles, I think this would be cool to see. I know Legends Arceus had 1v2 and 1v3 fights where you got ganged up on, but I'm talking classic 2v2 against trainers under the Legends mechanics. I say Legends mechanics like they're this fully established thing even though they're not. I mean, we've only had one Legends game, so I'm being a little too presumptuous that they won't change the concept too dramatically. The next one is a bit out there, but hear me out. Remember secret bases in Hoenn? I'm sure some of you really don't care about the concept, but I don't know. It's kind of a cute little thing you could do. So, Legends ZA is about the redevelopment of Lumiose City, right? Well, wouldn't it be kinda cool if your home base area could be a place you could customize? Like essentially build your own little home area, starting off from a very plain house, and being able to progress into something cool. If you haven't played the Hoenn games, think maybe like the house you could add things to in Breath of the Wild, but way more elaborate, as it would potentially fit with the theme of the game. And maybe some of the Pokemon you've caught but aren't currently using could occupy certain parts of the house. Maybe even expand on areas outside the house a bit too. Like that Seviper you caught hanging out in a tree you can put outside your door. I don't know. It's something I think could be really fun to watch unfold, customize, and recustomize over and over. Again, this isn't something I need to see, but it's definitely something I want to see. The only thing that might be kind of lame is if it's very single player focused, other players may not be able to visit these houses. There's one more thing here that I'm not sure if I've seen brought up too much, and that's the visuals. So Scarlet and Violet look pretty different from Sword and Shield. The Pokemon themselves look pretty different between the two games, with Sword and Shield being a bit safer in its approach, with a more typical cel-shaded style that you would expect from the series. Scarlet and Violet are more washed out, and some Pokemon have a bit more detail on them, looking a bit less clean, but still cel-shaded. Based on a few other CG-related things the franchise has put out recently, it seems like they really want to add a bit more detail to the Pokemon while still retaining the familiar stylistic choices. I think this is a good direction, but Scarlet and Violet's rough visuals definitely don't do it justice. The visuals of Pokemon games have been some of the most criticized aspects of the recent releases. So I think if they're going to stick with these choices, they need to make sure they actually optimize the game better, which hopefully is possible for the team with ZA releasing in 2025 rather than this year, presumably for the Nintendo Switch's successor, but who knows for sure. The other thing is to let it be just a little more colorful. because while I don't mind a subdued approach to the colors, I do think Scarlet and Violet's Pokemon look a little too dry in terms of their color spread compared to the games that came before it. On top of all this, I think we'd all like to see them keep some of the little bits of flair in the visual direction from Legends Arceus, like the concept of a unique interface, including the battles causing the game to go into this pseudo letterbox mode that really make them stand out a bit compared to the traditional Pokemon games whenever I go back for footage of them. It's those little things that go a long way in the end. Anyway, I'm expecting more than a teaser for the game, probably sometime in the next month or two. And no doubt, some of this stuff is gonna be in there. And hopefully, it'll be exactly what the series needs going forward, and able to give us a lot of concepts we didn't even realize we wanted. But what do you think? What do you want to see from Legends ZA? Let me know down below.